So pretty much what we're going to learn about today is the American Revolution. We're talking, everybody has their pages open to page 192. The American Revolution, it was between the periods of 1700s and, 1776 through 1783. So today, we're pretty much getting to know the information based on this section. There will be continuing lessons further on, but today we're going to be talking about the early years of the war. Some of the things you're going to need to know by the end of this session is what sacrifices did the civilians make during this time period? What sacrifices did the soldiers make during this time period? And is it worth such sacrifices to win your independence? So do you think that this war was fully necessary for these individuals to win the independence for us? All right, so one thing I want you to keep in mind, because it's going to be an exit ticket. What would you sacrifice to win your freedom? Would you have done the things that these individuals have done? So that's something that you're going to need to turn in for your exit ticket. But first, we're going to take a look at some of the vocabulary words that we have within the section that we're going to be reading. For this particular section, we only have for this particular section, you don't have any vocabulary words. However, yes?
I need a pencil.
Okay. However, you will need to know by the end of the lesson, you will need to know who is George Washington. You will need to know what a ministry is. You will need to know the strategies that they took, or what does the word strategy mean? And was it used the way that you thought it should be used within the text? You're also going to need to know what readiness is, and what did they use the word readiness for?
You mean relevance?
Yes, and what they used it for. And the last vocabulary word you need to know is the Battle of Sarajevo. Okay, and so that's pretty much it. However, like I told you before, we are not going to complete this entire unit today. This is going to be an ongoing process. Okay, so on your papers, you will write those 5 vocabulary words that I stated, and throughout the reading, you're going to have a better understanding of what they mean and why they use them throughout the text. Okay. So take a look at page 193. Can I get a reader, please? Okay. You're going to read now that you know where to stop at. Okay. Okay, so while he's reading, you guys are going to make sure that you're taking notes. Not necessarily writing down everything, but what's the most important information from this piece of reading. And you're going to put that in your bubble map, because somewhere it's going to tell us about the American difficulties within this small section, and we're going to continue. All right, you can start first.
Start on the Americans Divided.
Yes, where it says Americans Divided, that section.
The issue of separating from Great Britain divided American society. A penny code did not exist in the 1700s, so we did not know exactly how many people on each side. But historians estimate roughly 20 to 30% of Americans were loyalists, roughly 40 to 45% were patriots, the rest remained neutral. Most Americans did not support the American Revolution.
Okay.
Most patriots and loyalists came from all walks of life and all parts of America. Amen.
Yes.
In general, New England and Virginia had high numbers of patriots. Loyalists were numerous in cities in New York State and in the South. Many others.
Stop right there. Okay, so based on that small portion of information, we should be able to pull out at least 2 difficulties that the Americans faced. Can anybody tell me at least one per person if possible? What were some of the difficulties yes?
Most Americans didn't support the revolution.
Do we agree? Most Americans didn't support the revolution? All right, so that is one of the difficulties that you will put into one of your bubbles. Good job. All right, can somebody else give me one more difficulty that the Americans faced during the start of this war?
They didn't have much supplies.
Great job, they didn't have much supplies. So that would be something else that goes into the other circle. Anybody else, or do we want to continue reading? That's good. All right. So, do I have another volunteer to start where it says many loyalists worked?
Everybody gonna read?
Okay, I'll go. Many loyalists, they worked for the British government or were clergy in the Church of England. Some Quakers and loyalists, although many wanted peace, their faith taught that war was wrong. The war, it divided the Native Americans too. For instance, some of the Iroquois nations, they fought with the British and others with the Americans. The Native Americans who joined the British, they feared that if the Americans won, that they would take the Native Americans' land. All right, I just said some valuable pieces of information within that small section that I read. Young man, can you tell me what's one thing I said?
No, I was writing down. The war is divided Native
The word, say it louder.
The war divided Native America.
Yes, the war divided the Native Americans. Okay, yes. What do you need help with? How you confused? Oh, we're on this page. I start reading right here. All right, good job. He said that the war divided the Native Americans. One of the other things that you would be able to use is that they would take the Native Americans' land. If the Americans won, then British feared that if the Americans won, they would take the Native American land from the British. All right, last piece. Andrew, you wanna read for me? Where it says African American. African American also fought.
African American also fought on both sides. At first, slave-owned African Americans fled the African Americans who had guns might led slaves revolts. Therefore, a few states allowed African Americans to enlist or sign up with the army. The British, then a British governor, offered freedom to any enslaved person who joined the British army. Many slaves ran away to fight for a person who joined the British army. Many slaves ran away to fight for, I'm lost.
It's okay, take your time. Many slaves ran
away to fight for the British. In response, most states began to accept African American soldiers. In all, about 5,000 African Americans served in the Continental Army. Many African Americans who did so hoped the American independence would bring great equality.
Yep, that's it. Do you know what that word means?
Like equal, like you're equal to other people. Like everybody's equal.
Yes, correct. Good job. All right. So, let's pause for a moment. There's many things in there that caused difficulties for the civilians. Can anybody tell me at least one thing that caused difficulty for the civilians?
They had to let soldiers lay and sleep in their house, no matter what.
Okay, what can you tell me about the slaves?
The slaves had to
They
get
can work to get their freedom.
they get money,
Many slaves
and
ran.
they pay up the debt.
All right, hold on, one at a time. But you got, all y'all have great answers, great answers. All right, so Andrew, were you done?
I said that many slaves they can join the army to win their freedom.
Oh, yes, all right, great job. I want to say you guys' names, but,
Kamari.
okay.
The Continental Army. They say both.
Okay, all right, she had, an answer.
It says many slaves ran away to fight for the British.
Okay, yep, they did, they ran away to fight for the British. And,
It says they ran away, but most of them fought for the British, but they both fought on both sides.
correct,
So most of them fought for the British.
so they can win their freedom, right?
Yeah.
All right, so technically it was somewhat a benefit for them. All right, so although it was a difficult time for the slave owners, it was a benefit for the
It said
slaves.
it split families.
Okay, it did split families. Good job. All right, last one. You want to tell us your idea?
It said slaves work to pay up their debts for 7 years or more.
Correct, yes. So that means if they fought in the war, that was also a way of them earning their freedom. All right, cool guys. All right, so right now we should have lots of information on our concept maps, and a small portion of that, you're gonna draw like a line from that circle. If there's anything that you notice that is similar or that may be different within the video. So we're gonna watch the video for a couple minutes, and after the video, we're gonna come back, we're gonna share our ideas of what you wrote down in your thinking maps, and we're gonna conclude this lesson for today. I'm trying to make it louder. Uh-huh.
Columbus landed in Central America in October 1492, and he had the time of his life. And by that I mean he went on a huge theft and murder spree. He stole gold, jewelry, people, and a
It's going pretty fast. I apologize, y'all.
including a few previously undiscovered items, such as perfume, and a hammer. Now, in order to really simplify, Columbus didn't discover America, the Vikings did. And you'd be partially right. In the 11th century, Leif Erikson was the first European to land in America. But hey, if you love Vikings so much, then why don't you check out today's sponsor? Vikings War of Clans is a mobile game that was inspired by the famous strategy and RPG games of the 90s like Age of Empires and Civilization. Do you like building cities, collecting resources, training armies, joining a clan, and going to war? Then my friends, Vikings War of Clans is for you. And what makes this world so addictive is that more than 20 million online players are constantly changing the way the game evolves by never-ending fighting over resources, forging new alliances, and competing in live events. Support my channel by downloading Vikings for free, only from my links in the description box below, and get this special bonus of 200 gold coins and a protective shield. Don't forget to look me up and join my Vikings clan under my nickname, Oversimplified. Now where was I? Oh yeah, Columbus, time of his life, Hemet. And suddenly the race was on to explore and conquer the new world. After a couple centuries of warring with the natives and each other, the European powers discovered quite a lot of land, including this area, which both the English and the French claimed as theirs. One day the French said, I'm going to build some forts along here, and the English were like, could you not? And the French said, sorry, oh no, I could not. And they went ahead and built their forts, which pissed off the English, so they sent an up-and-coming British lieutenant colonel by the name of George Washington with a combined force of British troops and Native Americans. After a short battle, the French commander said, all right, we surrender. Okay, boys, pack it up, they've surrendered. I'm sorry, was I not meant to split his head open with the tomahawk? Don't worry, it's not like this will start a 7-year-long major global conflict. And what happened next was a 7-year-long major global conflict, which Great Britain won. After peace negotiations, Spain gave up Florida, while France gave up all of its territory.
Alright, just wanna pause it right there. What are we learning about the 7-year, there's a difference between the video and our book.
The battles are good.
Say it again.
The battles.
What do we say in our book? Who was, going for their freedom for that during that 7-year war? Did they mention anything about the slaves in the video? They did mention the 7-year war, but they didn't mention anything about the slaves. So somewhere, if any one of you put that, the 7-year war helped the slaves to gain their freedom, that would be like a difference. So you would connect that to that circle. With like drawing a line to show that there was a difference.
What are you talking about?
We're talking about the American Revolution and how it began in its early years. On that piece of paper, you were supposed to, that's okay, it's fine. On that piece of paper, we were supposed to create a map. So in the middle, it was supposed to be the American Revolution in the early years of war. And here, all of that information that we discussed, it was supposed to go into these boxes. So like, we were supposed to say how the, what were the difficulties of that the Americans encountered? Like, what difficulties did they have? We said that for the slave owners, it was difficult for them, but it was a benefit for the slaves. And then what else? The slaves wanted to fight for British. So the slaves were pretty much turning on the Americans, but they wanted to fight for British because that was gonna help them to gain their freedom. So pretty much in these boxes, you would put how the Americans were divided and the difficulties that many of them had to encounter. That's what we were doing. It's okay. As long as I know that you were listening and you did participate. You're doing a good job, don't worry. All right, so I just wanted to point out some of the differences that the video didn't mention, but our textbook did. So that's why it's important that we read the information from our textbook, as well as gain valuable knowledge from the media. All right, we'll finish, we're almost done.
Is in North America, but Britain's victory came at a cost, a £60 million cost. They were now broke, in a lot of debt, and had to come up with some way to repay it. So they went to the colonies and said, okay, listen up. So a huge part of the war was spent protecting you from the French, and now we have no money because of it. So, I'm not sure what you're saying here. Okay, so we spent a lot of money protecting you from the French, right? Right, and now we're broke. That certainly is a pickle. Listen to me. We spent all of our...
To a certain extent, they can say, we spent a lot of money for slaves to fight in the war, and the slaves got the benefit, but what happened if the British didn't really win the war? So it's that reverse part.